Hi, Jeff Bridgman here of Jeff R. Bridgman American Antiques in York County, Pennsylvania. I've come here today to tell you about this really tremendous homemade Civil War Confederate First National flag with some really unusual features and some great specific history. So this particular flag is in what we call the First National pattern, as I just said. And a lot of people don't know what that is. So realize that this is the design selected in early 1861 to be the national flag of the Confederate States of America. So therefore it was the equivalent to what the Stars and Stripes was to the Union and the Federal Army. And it was nicknamed the Stars and Bars by Confederate soldiers, but its problem was what? Well, as a signal, it wasn't too great. It looked way too much like the Stars and Stripes on the battlefield. Battlefields were full of black powder smoke, guns, swords, knives, black powder everywhere, cannon. I mean, it was mayhem. And there was smoke on these battlefields that would, especially if you were in a valley, you would just, you couldn't see anything. You needed to be able to see that flag and know where your guys were and know what to do. So at the First Manassas, troops, both Confederate and Union, were firing on each other because they couldn't tell who was who. So that's why this was abandoned later and mostly replaced by the Southern Cross battle flag, which was never a national flag of the Confederacy. So there's your little history story there. Now, this particular flag is a great one because it's homemade, but yet I think it probably saw some military use. But what's really wonderful about it are the fabrics and construction and its presentation. This is just a gorgeous flag in all respects. It's made of very fine silk that's almost translucent. The colors have an almost an opalescence to them because of that. And if you look closely, and if you can't see here in the video, you'll see in my close-up photos better, that you can see the striations in the fabric, north to south, in both the white and the red bars, which is just beautiful because you can see the texture with which the fabric was woven, and this variation just makes for a beautiful fabric. It's probably ladies' dress silk. It wasn't intended for flag making, but it was what was available to the maker. The canton is also very fine silk. You can see a lot of striations going from one side to the other, and it's this beautiful sort of seafoam green that it's faded to. It probably started with an unusual color. Once again, probably ladies' dress fabric, not intended for flag making. So, but the best part of all, in terms of materials, are the stars. The stars are, in this instance, made of silver paper foil. Now, with most flags, if somebody said, "Oh, I've got a great Civil War flag and its stars are made of paper," I would roll my eyes and, oh God, okay, cool, show me what it looks like. Here, it's a whole different ballgame. These are absolutely phenomenal. They are fat, definitely just cut out by hand, and they have a pressed decoration on them. So there's a pressed floral pattern on them that's just terrific. So these take it to a whole nother level. It's definitely one of my favorite Civil War examples I've ever seen, just because of that. And the stars are on both sides. So on a lot of homemade flags you'll see of this period, they're just on one side. And those flags were definitely made for some sort of use at a, maybe hung from a podium, maybe displayed just at a parade by a family, that's possible, hung somewhere, but not used for any other purpose, such as military use. Now, foil stars, you say, you're not going to see that on the battlefield very often. Well, here's what probably happened. This flag has all hand sewn, beautifully hand sewn, has the sort of characteristics of a Bible flag. A Bible flag was a little flag made by a loved one for a soldier when they went away to war. Often carried in the Bible, they were very small. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 of them right here with me. And they have a tremendous amount of personality, usually, and come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes. And it's not completely uncommon to see one that has foil stars. In fact, this one does right below me. So a woman making this for her husband, probably, an officer, probably, as he mustered out with his company, might stand on and watch a parade of the soldiers marching by, or be in some sort of rally where they are presenting things and trying to honor the troops and rev them up as they go out for Civil War service. She might wave one of these little flags or something bigger like this and then gift it to her husband as he left. Would you fly it on the battlefield much? Yeah, probably not. But he might display it outside his tent if weather conditions permitted when he's in camp. Nothing wrong with that. Reminds him of his wife. He can tell her in letters that he's flying it and he's not lying. And his tremendous little flag. And if the unit didn't have flank guidons as it left, which is always a possibility, they might actually carry this until they could obtain something that was more suitable for really hard use. It was definitely tacked to a staff and used for a significant amount of time, somewhat soiled, and the stars really hung on pretty good. I had to re-adhere a little bit here and there, but honestly, they are on there. So it was more durable than it might seem. And in the South, there was less access to material goods than there was in the North. They had to get by with what they had, and sometimes this was the answer. The woman may not, she could really sew, but maybe she didn't know how to applicate. She didn't have a lot of time, but she had something beautiful. And it looked like it should be military. It had the elegance necessary for the purpose, right? So that is probably what took place here. Note how the canton of the flag is more vertical than it is horizontal, and that's a wonderful feature too. I always love to see in Civil War flags. Now, this flag has some interesting history because it was brought back by an abolitionist, a staunch opponent of slavery. This was a gentleman by the name of Eliphalet Whittlesey. Yes, I had to work on that a whole bunch before I could actually use it in the video because it is a mouthful. But Eliphalet Whittlesey, he was born in 1841 in Hartford County, Connecticut, so near Hartford, and he attended Yale for both undergraduate and graduate studies, and then he went to seminary in Andover. For a time between seminary and Yale, actually taught in Alabama, of all things. So I don't know how he got down there, but I will bet that when he was down there, he developed a sadness for what he saw at the way African Americans were probably treated in that region. So I think that really stuck with him for the rest of his life and probably led to a lot of what he did thereon. So here was a guy whose father was a farmer and a teacher, salt of the earth, right? And he also, though later in life, went on to serve in the Connecticut state legislature. His father, so Eliphalet's grandfather, fought in the Revolutionary War, and his great-grandfather fought in the French and Indian Wars, and his great-great-grandfather fought in the early Indian Wars. So here's a family with a long history of both military service and now public service, and that's pretty much what Eliphalet Whittlesey went on to do for the remainder of his life. So in 1862, he's teaching at Bowdoin College in Maine and decides, all right, I can't wait any longer. And he enlists with the 19th Maine Infantry, where he served in the capacity of chaplain, but not for very long, because he was plucked from that position by General O.O. Howard, the famous General O.O. Howard, famous unfortunately for his huge blunder at Gettysburg, but we won anyway. At any rate, they were both staunch opponents of slavery. They saw eye to eye, man of the cloth and staunch Christian who sought to do whatever they could to ease the plight of blacks in the South. And they did it first as soldiers in the Civil War, and they did it later as people in charge of Reconstruction. So what happened for the next 4 years was basically Whittlesey was promoted 6 times. He was adjutant general for O.O. Howard. He was adjutant and judge advocate. He was breveted lieutenant colonel. He was breveted brigadier general. And he mustered out at the rank of brigadier general at the end of the war, then mustered right back into military service. And he was given the rank of colonel and put in charge of what had been, back in 1863, the very first black regiment that fought for the Union Army. Back then, they were called the 1st Arkansas. That was the very first black troops raised, later designated as the 46th U.S. Colored Troops. After Lee's surrender, he's put in charge and realized that when Lee surrendered, not every Confederate general had surrendered yet. It took time to wrap this thing up. It wasn't, I think, until the end of the summer, maybe, until the last of them really turned themselves in. So in June, he's down in Texas with the 46th, trying to keep Confederate troops from running into Mexico to avoid surrender. They want to get everybody to surrender, sign the appropriate papers, go home, and pledging their allegiance to the Union and agreeing not to serve in the Confederacy anymore. So basically, he does that for a period of time. But then, being still big buddies with O.O. Howard, who had been put in charge of the Bureau of Freedmen to reintroduce, how do you want to say, to try to help blacks integrate into society after what had just happened. Wasn't an easy thing. They weren't given a big budget. It was always a difficulty. But O.O. Howard made Whittlesey the assistant director of that, and then put him in charge of the state of North Carolina specifically, and sent him down there, where he stayed until 1867. The flag comes with a note that he brought the flag back in 1867 from North Carolina. Where he had obtained it is hard to know. Did he obtain it while chasing guys in the South? Probably. Or during the war when he was on staff, maybe. He might have been gifted it at some point, but I bet he took it in the South as a war trophy and carried it with him. So, great thing. You do not see this pattern being made instantly after the war. It's not until the reunion period that you would see it. So it's an early war flag and something he took as a trophy from a unit, probably from an officer, with it somewhere in the South, leading the first ever organized black unit in the Civil War. What a great story. He goes on, by the way, with O.O. Howard to found Howard University in Washington, D.C. So, beautiful flag, great story, great history, interesting character, and a wonderful thing to add to any Civil War collection. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.